right, buddy. Appreciate it. So again, my name is Alan Melley with the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. I am not with the Federal Highway Administration. I will preface that. So this is actually, I know that's what the slide says. So with the Federal Highways not being able to travel to BIM Week this week, I actually got a call last week. I said, hey, can you provide an update on federal highways and where they are with BIM and so forth and the ADCMS grants? And I told Will I would. So here it goes. We'll see how well this goes. But I did talk to James a little bit last week about his slide deck and what he wanted me to really convey. So one of the things that they really set the stage for is they have BIM and the building information modeling. So the definition that they use for BIM is something that most of us use as we go through this and advance digital delivery and BIM throughout the country. Some of the documents that they have are that BIM National Strategic Roadmap. This document is very beneficial. It's something that was developed back in, I believe it was 2021, which we've looked at may need updated here soon because a lot of stuff has changed in the past few years. But this is one of those documents that a lot of us in this room reference and utilize for the advancement of digital delivery and on our journeys through this implementation plan. So as we look to crawl, walk, run, and then fly, we're all at different stages of digital delivery and this process as we go through and try to set those national standards as we're all working towards building that ultimate model and that complete life cycle of the project. So we're all at different stages. We're all aiming to get to that point where we're flying. We're all on that journey. Some a little bit farther than others. So with this week in the BIM pooled funds, really it's a lot of states coming together to really advance this and advance it together. So as you can see, there's a lot of states that are in both, and this slide is, or map is probably outdated at this point, but it's really building that synergy throughout the industry. And the BIM pooled funds, this is another slide that is used to show the what the differences are between the two pooled funds, but there are a lot of similarities, and we're coming together, and that's what this week is all about. Is really coming together to synergize on where we're moving with both pooled funds. We're moving in the same direction. We're not, developing different items, or, there's some items that are the same that both pooled funds are going to need. We need to come together to figure those out. So as we, work through with our, as we deploy this and, federal highways and their innovation programs, really try to work together. So we developed this, to bring our partners together, to share ideas and provide the funding, that's a big key, to mitigate the risk and deploy proven ideas. But some of that funding that Federal Highways has provided here recently is the ADCMS grants. So how many in this room have been a part of an ADCMS grant or been affected by an ADCMS grant? Great, almost every single one of us. So this is very important to the industry, and I'll talk about a couple points that definitely want to stress about the ADCMS grants. So with the IIJA, it's set from fiscal year 22 to 26, $100 million. So Federal Highways has distributed a lot of that. There's still, I believe 2 more rounds of ADCMS. He did not give me any indication of when the next round is coming out. So I can't provide any of that information, but it is an important program. So with those ADCMS grants, the first round was actually a 2-year, so 22 and 23. It was announced in June of 23 and awarded in November of 23. So funding, became available for those 2 fiscal years. for the first round. So there was 26 applications, of which 10 were awarded a total of $33.9 million. So with that, you can see here, these are the states that were awarded those grants in the first 2 years in that first, NOFO. So wide variety of different projects to tackle, all relevant to exactly what we're doing and what we're talking about here today. So those areas of interest, the CDE and standards, 15 states, saw that as the largest thing that they were actually going after. Data capture, software upgrades. So it varied of exactly what it was we were all trying to accomplish with that first round of ADCMS grants. But the round 2 came out for fiscal year 24. Which was announced in May of 24 and awarded in October of 24. There were 28 applications with a total request in excess of $80 million. So of those applications, 8 were awarded for a total of $16.6 million. So these are the states that were awarded those grants for the fiscal year 24. And so as you will see here, the areas of interest, again, stayed very similar with the CDE and standards at 9 states, data capture, software upgrades, and so forth. So still that, that focus on those, CDEs and standards. So still tough to identify trends at this point, but data collection and standards needs to be addressed before data storage and access standards. So what have we learned? So the first, observations from the applications that, the majority of us are struggling to connect that data. It's moving that data, between all phases of our organization. So, and the goal and desire to have all that information in a common data environment. That's something that, we're actively working towards, even on the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation side, is, that common data environment, have that same single source of truth. And then, for the second observation from the applications is the states would like to make it easier to collect that data. How do we capture that? I know that's a challenge, and it's even a challenge in Pennsylvania. So as we look at the BIM pooled fund participants and the ADCMS, you can see there's a lot of overlap. So, one of those things that, James wanted me to stress, and I took some notes from our conversation, so I didn't forget. But as far as, the reauthorization bill is coming up, they are working on it, and that's actually next on the list following the shutdown. So it will be coming soon. So with those states that have been awarded grants, how many from the states have been awarded those grants? Okay. So one of the things that he wanted me to make sure I stressed is those semi-annual reports that we put together really mean a lot to the program. So we need to take the extra effort to really show how we are benefiting from these grants, because the current messaging right now is not hitting Capitol Hill. So it, is very difficult for him to sell this if he doesn't have the numbers to show. So there, has to present on, he has $100 million that he's given out over the past, few years. What am I getting back for that? What are those stories that he has to tell to Capitol Hill to be able to sell to get, the next IIJA or the next round of funding? So he does not have solid enough numbers at this point. So he's looking for those ROIs. I know it's a difficult thing to do, and I agree it is, but that's something we need to try to dig down to tell those stories, to get those numbers for him, because this is important And as you can see, it affected every single one of us almost in this room. So can't stress it enough, because we really need to drive home those political points. You know, we need to make that political message, even though, you know, we're not very political a lot of times. You know, we're engineers, we like numbers, but we have to talk the points to be able to get additional funding moving forward. So if we can show an ROI, you know, document the efficiencies that we're realizing, show as much of that ROI. How is this making it better for the states? You know, so, and how much money has been saved? Is there any savings that you have seen by going through, you know, these grants and stuff like that? So, you know, one of the things is that, you know, yes, we have consultants in this room, we have vendors in this room and so forth. You know, they hear from you all the time as far as, you know, that outreach, but this really has to come from the states as far as a lot of those talking points. You know, our consultants, our vendors and stuff like that, yes, they're, you know, they're making, you know, a lot of, you know, money off of those grants because we're paying them to do a lot of the stuff. We're paying the vendors, we're paying the consultants and so forth. So it hits different if it comes from the states to show exactly what it is we're gaining out of this. How are we benefiting our constituents, and how are they benefiting in their areas from this? So if we can tell the story, it really, really makes it beneficial. So it's really, what did we get for that that investment? And those semi-annual reports are usually due June 30th, December 30th. One of the things that he asked me if there is any of the states, if we could submit those as early as possible, because he's again getting ready to, you know, start to discuss, you know, the ADCMS program and so forth. He needs those numbers and that information as soon as we can get it to him. So if in advance of the, you know, this December 30th, the sooner you can get it in, the better. He would very much appreciate that. So I believe his contact, yeah, so his contact information is here. So hopefully I was able to cover his stuff that that he would have, and he wishes he could have been here to participate in BIM week this week. So with that, Mike, I'll throw it over to you.
Thank you, Alan. We're going to go right into JSTAN committee updates of Ms. Trisha and Mr. Will.
All right, it's me again. I don't get to go very far. So I keep forgetting we have people online, because I know a lot of you have seen this already. You might know. I'm just going to do a show of hands of those of you that don't know what JSTAN is in the room. No, you're lying. You're lying. These 5 guys in the back raise their hand. Does that mean everyone else knows? Okay, well, that's good. I think online they probably don't. And so I don't want to go too fast here, but I definitely am happy to talk about this again because I think it's important. So Janice, I might just do this. Okay, so I'm going to introduce JSTAN. If you already know this, you can check your email. I'll let you do that today. And then I'm going to describe the digital world of transportation. Again, I don't want to go over things we've already done before, but I think this is just something that's interesting to me. So I'm going to talk about that, the status of some current data standards development, and then our AASHTO role in adopting modern data standards, which is really important. And so the circle of life exists again. Of course, IT's asset management is in the middle because that's what I do. But JSTAN's mission statement. So again, this is an AASHTO committee. It's actually a subcommittee. What is our mission? I'll give you the next slide how it all started. But we want to champion and coordinate efficient information flow through the life cycle of all assets and related information that comprise of transportation systems. So we want to champion and coordinate. We want to be that body that can do that For all the other committees out there, JSTAN is set up to do this. This will be achieved through open data standards, which AASHTO is not used to open data standards. So I'm just going to say that. Data governance, schema development, and collaborative public and private partnerships. One of the first things that we did, and is Julia still here? Glenn's here in the back. Is Julia still here too? I just want to say thank you to AASHTO, to Glenn and Julia for supporting us on this. And so we did do an update to the website, really talk about the mission, what committees are represented and why the work is needed. And if you want to go find the JSTAN website, it's not really super searchable. We're trying to figure out a better way to do that, but you can find us under the Data Management and Analytics Committee. So this is how AASHTO is set up. And I really like this diagram. You can see the board of directors, the executive committee, the strategic management committee there in green. You can see there's transportation policy forums or councils kind of making policy. This might be similar to other of our international friends. This is the way that AASHTO kind of is organized. There's special committees that include FHWA. So that is like a software basically that's being kind of governed by the states. So that's cool, as well as I think someone talked to us, Will's here, about the research and innovation component of this a little bit and how that committee's there. Then there's the agency administration, there's enterprise discipline committees in yellow, and then orange is going to be sort of, what does it say, program delivery and operation committees. So we are, where is JSTAN in this? Bunch of fun, wonderful people. We're sitting under data management and analytics, but we have members across those star states at 2 members from each parent committee. So design, bridges and structures, construction, TISMO, I'm gonna call it for Matt, and then performance-based management. And then we also have 2 members from the Council of Highway and Streets and AASHTO, I don't want to forget that. So what happened again, 2019, you've seen, I basically have dreams about AR 1-19, I'm not joking, about this committee and how it was formed and how at the same time IFC, right, was adopted. And so officially came into the establishment. I don't know when we actually had the first meeting, but it took a while, I believe. Mike is in the room today, did great work with this committee. But again, cross-cutting, we're sitting under data and analytics, but we do have, again, the green. I don't know if these are the same color. I should have done that. Green, blue, gray, and then the special committee. And those are the members that that make up JSTAN. I want to reiterate too, this is not my full-time job. This is like, I have staff, I have things going on all the time. We have a lot of other things as a DOT that we have to be responsible for. So I really want to thank people that are here that say we want to do extra things, that we believe in this. That's what this committee is. They really believe in this work, you guys. And you hear it from Will, you hear it from myself. We're trying to be engaged. Cheryl is doing a ton. Scott's here. So these are people just like you that just really care about this, want to push this forward. And we had our annual meeting and I thought, I wonder how many people are going to be able to come, because it was in DC and it was a standalone meeting and we're all traveling a lot. We had like everybody but 2 that came to that meeting, and the other 2 were online the whole day. So these are just really star folks out there wanting to contribute. And we do have, in place your name here, some vacancies that we're looking for. So if you have an interest in this, you do have to be on a parent committee or on a parent subcommittee to be involved with us, but we're looking for those kind of 3 positions. So again, that AR 1-19, it said JSTAN was created to coordinate schema development, identify gaps, resolve conflicts, and avoid duplication of efforts that could occur across multiple parent committees. It's just like water. Water doesn't just stay in the right of way. Oh yeah, that's the right of way. Let me just stay in my lane. I think the same thing goes with standards. Standards go across different parts of different functional areas. So we need to have that ability to sort of avoid duplication of efforts. So let's get our ducks in a row. Let's start to talk. We've been doing this for a couple years. I think I started out like, let's write a strategic plan. And it was like, okay, hold on, Trish. That was like a 5-year plan that I wanted to do in a year. I didn't realize what we were doing and what we were up against, but we've done a ton to do communication. Look at how can we do some sort of reorganization and put that back on sort of our AASHTO leadership, again, with AASHTO's help to say, how can we reorganize? Where should we be doing standards, governance, and development and adopting standards? And let's coordinate and educate. As you're hearing Building Smart do here, a lot of this is about education. So this is a cool one. And I know Matt Miller could stand up here and do this better than I can, but DOTs are modernizing, right? We're using more equipment. I love the stop ahead example that Matt has, where basically you can plug in, the stop signs and you have autonomous vehicles and they know it's coming. We just have this ability now to utilize data and streams of data coming off of this. I have a huge project coming up, which is exciting in MnDOT, to use telematics for our snow plows, creating magical work orders, but utilizing all this great data coming off our devices at the DOTs. And we really want to utilize and leverage technology opportunities. And then I'm going to just go through this slide quickly. We want the future, right? The digital DOT future and openBIM. So tunnels of efficiency. I like this slide from Will. If you do a design and you say, this is our early design, we do environmental review in a different area without the same model. And then we go through and we say, now we're going to do our utility review. Again, not connected, not systems that you can see in live real time. So then you change that design. And what happens? We have to redo, we have rework, we have to recommunicate. So instead, we really want to see all of that, if I can get the right clicks, together. And that's the concept, right? We're communicating seamlessly. There we go. Come on. Does that look good? I don't really know if I'd put that in the bottom of the ditch. So what are modern transportation data standards? You guys saw this last time. What I want to point out here, this is AI, my favorite co-pilot. But here I want to say, it's not just about agreed upon rules, but it's a common language. So we've heard this, traffic, signals, buses. It's getting all this data from all these different areas, and we're knowing that that's common and standard. And I like the visual here and just the concept of early cars. When you looked at, Ford, or maybe this is before Ford, I think it was Ford, right? Probably Will. Each piece was hand-built, custom fit. It was weeks to months to get it done. It cost $4,000. So that's about $140,000 in 2025 to make a car. They said, let's do that differently. Let's standardize the parts. Let's use an assembly line. Smoother worker handoffs. Reduce waste time. So this is a really kind of good example of how that manufacture time, how the costs, went way down because they figured out a standard way to do this. Numerous digital data standards developed. So I just wanted to highlight a couple things here. That work zone data exchange that goes back to, that's been developed. It's out there. We're using it already. This isn't a new thing. It just depends on where you are kind of in the industry. The pooled funds are going to speak, so I'm not going to say that, but I-80 corridor, I think this slide is really meant to sort of say across sectors, standards are happening. Across industry, different areas, it's happening. Bike and ped, I-80 coalition, again, work zone, pooled funds. And this one is $9 million at least has been spent so far on this. So we really want to continue to work and invest in standards. And again, Will, I love your slides. This is how it takes AASHTO a while to publish something because they have to use this. But this is the basically now the traditional publication process is printed in PDF books. That's what we have seen, where you wait over time to get a new version. We can't function like that anymore. It's very inefficient to recreate digital standards. We want to have, the standard there with an adoption of AASHTO right next to that standard book. So figuring out a way to do this, and one click makes it available for everyone. And these are two examples: materials delivery management, and then just the intelligent construction data. These come from Rebecca Embacher at MnDOT. and others have done a really great work here. We don't just want to have it in a book, you guys. This is actually like saying this is the file format in a book. We need that to be a digital format. So last slide, AASHTO has a critical role. We've been talking about this. They know that, we're trying to talk to leadership more about how can we do this at AASHTO. And so JSTAN again created just to do that. Here's a good example, Open Geospatial Consortium. I just highlighted this. This is a way that AASHTO could do this. This is a pretty cool website if you want to go look at it. And you open up that standard, it talks about a splash page of that description. There's digital file links, various types, software development. I think GitHub might be here, so you have some sort of GitHub. And then you also have that standard PDF specification. So this is what it could look like. And then I was trying to design something that's like AASHTO adopted digital standard. There could be like a nice ping with it or something. So again, our ask here is that we want to have governance, voting authority. We want to have some funding to really test, maintain, train, and implement standards and develop a modern publishing process. There are 2 meetings in a couple weeks that are going to happen that they're talking about this, about the need for this, about the state saying that, all of us in the room online. So please help support this, help to support what is a digital standard? What is interoperability? What are we asking for? And so hopefully we'll get kind of some more direction after the AASHTO annual meeting. And we do have a 1-pager that we created that probably is close to hitting the mark, could be improved. So that's it for me, and reach out to me anytime.
Thank you, Trish. Trish, before you get off stage, I have a question for you.
Okay.
In my role as DOT, what can we do to help support JSTAN?
Is that you asking the question?
Yeah, that is me, Mike
you're-
Pearson. I'm
you're-
asking the
okay.
question. What can I do to help
Yeah.
support you more?
Yeah, thank you. I think right now we want to have clear messages to executive leadership on what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and why it's important. Because I just think that there's, like we talked about, digital delivery might be understood, but that's kind of a design to construction thing, right? We're talking now about digital standards and interoperability. So what is that, and how does that impact executive leadership? So it was nice on Monday to have kind of a session on that and how to, because what we're finding is what's hitting the mark is safety. Safety always hits the mark. And then talking about economy and how this can impact economy and just economics. So kind of money and safety. And I would say the same thing to FHWA and some of the reports that we're going to need to do. And I know WSB Ed is here. Like, we got to get those reports to be oriented towards money and safety and stories, so they really can relate to it. Okay, thanks, Mike. I know we're supposed to wait with questions, but I couldn't wait. All right, Sam is up.
Sam is up. And I believe Sam is virtual, right?
I am. Good afternoon, if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Sam.
Great. And do you see my slides also?
Yes, sir.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thanks, everybody. A huge thank you to everybody who's gone into putting this conference on, and specifically this event within the event. It's really exciting for all of us to be a part of it. Very sad that I can't be with you all there in person, but I assure you I'm there in spirit. So my name is Sam Woods. I'm the State Roadway Design Engineer at GDOT. And as of a few weeks ago, or maybe a couple months ago now, very proud to fill the recently vacated role of Vice Chair on AASHTO's JTCEES, which is what I'm here presenting to you all this afternoon. I'm presenting on behalf of our chair, Jennifer Lloyd, who's from Tennessee DOT. She's also unable to attend the conference this year. If anyone in the room was there for my presentation on Monday, this would be the time to hit the restroom or catch up on emails, because it's going to be very similar. So here's what I'd like to talk to you all about today. A very straightforward outline, basically who we are and what we've been doing. And who we are, talk about where we fit in with the AASHTO organization, who our membership is, and just give you a flavor of what this group has been up to for the past 10 years or so. So that's how long we've been around, for about 10 years. And to kind of state the obvious here, that was before the 2019 AASHTO resolution that Trisha just admitted she dreams about, which is hilarious. So I'm relatively new to this group. I've been involved for about 3 years, so still kind of getting my feet under me with a formal role in the subcommittee, and also to the AASHTO committees in general. It's very likely that many people in the room today with y'all are current or past members or friends. If y'all don't mind, if that is the case for you, if you could please raise your hand. That way, if people have follow-up questions in person, they'll be able to reach out to you after the presentation. I appreciate it. This next slide is going to look familiar to y'all. So I'm going to just explain who we are in terms of our name, kind of just break it down one at a time here. First of all, we are a technical committee. So our parent committee in the AASHTO organization is the Committee on Design, or COD. And we are one of a list of subcommittees that you're seeing here on the left side of the screen. Okay, the fact that we are a joint technical committee, that means in addition to our parent committee being the Committee on Design, we also have these 4 collaborative committees: construction, materials and pavement, transportation system operations, and performance-based management. So the word joint to me in this context makes me think of things like cross-disciplinary, collaborative, interoperability when it comes to our data, and focus on the life cycle of the assets that we're dealing with. All right, and lastly, in this mouthful of a name for our technical committee is Electronic Engineering Standards. And it won't be surprising to most people in the room and online, I think, that the vocabulary has evolved over the years as we've all been working on this initiative. So if we had the opportunity to rename our committee today, it might shake out slightly differently, but the core purpose and function and intent of our group would be basically the same, I would say, having not been there myself personally. But an example of that would be the word electronic. You know, probably what we really mean here is digital, but the core message here is getting away from paper, moving towards electronic, and then finally digital. Engineering is going to be a big part of it, but we recognize this is not an engineering initiative. It doesn't, 3D design models are a big part of it, but there's a lot more to it than that. We're focused on the entire life cycle. And as far as standards go, these are a couple examples of documents that we have published on our website. If anybody would like to take a look, there's a link to that later on. And I do want to just pause here and say that our group, our subcommittee, JTCEES, along with the COBS Technical Committee on Technology, COBS-T, if I'm getting that correct, these were the groups that kind of came together to draft that resolution in 2019, again, the one that Trisha dreams about. So that effort ties us together in these subcommittees and kind of proves the fact that it is collaborative. This is how we're described on AASHTO's website right now. So I'm not going to read it all, but I'm highlighting the things that jump out to me that support our overall purpose. The fact that we're focused on data, the thing that we're going to be transitioning from 2D to 3D, and that we're concerned about the life cycle of an asset. This is our current membership. So Patricia Bush is our AASHTO liaison, Catherine Petros is our FHWA liaison, and as I mentioned before, Jennifer Lloyd is our chair. Jennifer's the second chair of the group. Mike Kennerly, who many of y'all probably know, was our first chair and took it up until a couple of years ago when he retired. I believe we were affectionately known as Mike's committee early on in our life. So we have many longtime DOT members also that are not on this list, but were instrumental, I mean, really foundational likely in the formation of our group. Names like Bill Pratt and George Lukes and John Wilkerson. I'm sure I'm forgetting some here, but DOT members who really helped get this go. In addition to our formal members, and the function of the Friends is changing now, but we have absolutely critical partnerships with Friends, and mostly those are represented by people in consulting firms and software providers who are really helping guide and influence our conversations and directions as a technical committee. So thank you to all the members and Friends. And now I'm going to give you an idea of what we've been doing. So you're going to see some examples of webinars that happened in 2021. I'll show you some in 2022. This is one of the most active things that our technical committee has been doing. If you're unaware of these and you're in a DOT specifically, I would highly encourage you to watch them. They're very relevant, especially if your DOT is just beginning their journey to BIM like we are at GDOT. All the recordings are available on our website. And here's another list to give you a flavor of the topics of those webinars. We have a bit of a hiatus right now, but we're looking to pick these back up next month and continue them in 2026. And here are some topics that you can expect in the near future. All right, what else have we been doing? Here's a screenshot from our beautiful website here that shows some of the documents that we published here. Maybe I'll draw your attention to that top one, which is called Models of Legal Document Guidance and Appendices. Again, kind of a recognition of the changing vocabulary over time. What would probably be a more accurate term now instead of MALD would be BIM. This is the document that really provides state DOT's guidance on basically developing their plan and working through that plan to BIM maturity. You know, the basics of assessing capabilities, IDing your targets, and steps to get there. The other things you're seeing here are more one-pagers or white papers, excuse me, as I'll call them. And the model element breakdown template is an Excel spreadsheet. Last thing I want to just let you all know about is to give you a flavor of the conversations that happened in the recent AASHTO Committee on Design annual meeting. So we heard a lot of presentations, probably from many of the same groups that are at BIM Week today. So we heard about the importance, generally speaking, of a national open data standard. We heard reports from both pooled funds for bridges and infrastructure. We heard an update from JSTAN, heard an update from Will on the BSI Summit. And we had a presentation from the BIM for Infrastructure group on their work on information requirements, working towards a data dictionary to hopefully eventually be adopted by AASHTO. Had a couple of work sessions in our annual meeting also. The first one was the development of coming up with model viewer requirements for an eventual RFP. And this was led by Alan Melley from PennDOT, who just presented. The idea here is that we will identify the high-level features down to the granular capabilities that we as AASHTO states are looking for in the functionality of a model viewer, so that companies can see what they can come up with to fulfill those needs. We also started the conversation about updating the document that I mentioned earlier. It's been out for a while now, and it's time to give it a fresh look. One specific thing we're considering doing is emphasizing the more interaction earlier in the project with stakeholders is important. So my last slide here is just to feel free to stay in touch with us. Here is our website. We generally meet the first Monday of each month. We want as much interaction as we can with other groups. We want to help groups like JSTAN. So as we're all trying to figure out how to do that, JTCEES obviously wants to be a part of that conversation. And here is the contact information for Jennifer Lloyd, our chair, and me as the vice chair. So that's the end of our presentation. Happy to take any questions if now's the time for that. And if not, I'll hang out for as long as I can.
Thank you, Sam. We're going to hold questions to the end. It looks like we're running ahead of schedule. However, there goes Jim. Here comes Julie. I feel like we need some music running, Trish. Seth, I feel like we need some music running or something. All right.
Is this working?
The next session, Transportation Pool Fund, BIM for Bridges and Structures. Please welcome Jim and Julie.
I'm going to go very brief because we have 67 slides and Julie's going to be doing most of the talking. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the sponsors. I think this is a great opportunity for everyone to get together. Next slide. We're going to be covering the BIM for Bridge Pooled Fund, Phase 1, Phase 2, and where we're at, updates, and the pilots that we have done. Uh-oh. Closer? Is that working?
Turn it on.
I picked it up. I'll use this one. There we go.
Use that one.
Is that one working?
It is.
Perfect. It was high. It wasn't on. We'll cover the pooled funds, yada, yada, yada. We're going to go over the project vision where we have focused very specifically on this. This is the IFC exchanges, the IDMs, the IDSs that go with it for a specific workflow. We haven't deviated from that vision, and it's a very specific focus on that vision. So when we talk about wanting tangible deliverables, this is what it is. project visions and goals. I'm going to take a few seconds on this slide. You know, we've had 24 states participating, including the FHWA, the NSBA, which is the National Steel Bridge Alliance, is also working on joining this pooled fund to work on that fabrication exchange, which is a hard, tangible deliverable again. Another cool thing is everyone on that list on the executive team is here, unfortunately, except for the FHWA. It would be hopefully next year we'll have our whole executive team here. Photo of me. The other cool thing is, so during our BIM meeting, there is going to be 6 to 7 states piloting products from our first pooled fund as actual deliverables. And that is actually getting this stuff in action. I think it's a really cool opportunity that identifies some resource needs that we have, you know, the support and the training for implementing that and what we need. I won't get into software validation or certification now. I think that's going to be a little trickier 10-minute sale than I thought, but I think we'll manage. Should I quit, Julie? I think that covers most of it. Thanks, everyone.
All right, so buckle up, here we go. Quick overview and update on BIM for bridges and structures. So we always like to reiterate what the vision is and what the problem is that we're trying to solve so that it's very clear. So let me just adjust this here because I have to read a couple of things. I won't be reading much, but can't read that small print here. Okay, so that as well, okay. So this is the problem that the pooled fund effort is trying to solve. Designers, contractors, and state DOT asset owners who want to use 3D models and digital technology cannot share information if they do not use the same brand of software. Hold on. There we go. So the vision is to enable consistent, reliable, repeatable digital information exchanges for transportation agencies for bridge design, construction, and asset management. So the solution is developing AASHTO endorsed data standards to facilitate digital workflows and share information in a non-proprietary format. So the idea is that these solutions will be adopted, deployed, and maintained by state DOTs, not individually, but collectively at the national level. And these standards will be implemented by technology providers, meaning a whole suite of software vendors, as well as other software developers that may be in-house to certain stakeholders. And the solutions will be accepted by industry to encourage use and drive innovation. So that is the vision. Now, we can also show the vision in a more graphical way. And as was mentioned earlier, we like to embrace the idea of recycling and deploying. So I think we're recycling some slides here. Will Holmes did a great job presenting this, so I won't go through this, but the graphics that he showed earlier, which are the same ones I'm showing here, are really showing that vision of the BIM for Bridges Pooled Fund in a graphical way. And it has to do with utilizing the tool that is the best fit for the team or the person that's doing the work. So in a bridge project, let's say from design through asset management, that's what this is showing. So using the software of their choice and then exporting an IFC file that is consistent with the IFC schema and compliant with our information delivery manual and our IDS. Oops. And then the owner in the design, bid, build, procurement methodology, the owner would advertise the project, including that IFC data set. And this would have all that geometry, the relationships, the semantics that the contractor could then use and import that IFC file into the software of their choosing. So that's the same idea that Will presented earlier, and I think we saw this yesterday as well. Ultimately, by having the information in this non-proprietary format, it will lend itself to having digital as-built that the owner can then use for operations and maintenance down the road, using the software that they need to for asset management. So that's kind of the vision in a nutshell, and I'm going to give a brief summary of phase 1 and phase 2 and what I mean by phase 1 and phase 2. So the original pooled fund study, the work started in 2018 and lasted through 2024, the early part of last year. This was the first pooled fund study, and the purpose was to develop initial standards to exchange 3D bridge models, and we decided to focus on one single data exchange. I think it was Ian earlier that mentioned that we have a process map that looks at the bridge life cycle and all the different exchanges of information that can occur. And there's 19 different data exchanges identified in this process map. And it was actually here in San Diego in February of 2020 when the pooled fund members met with our team and we prioritized what the DOTs wanted to focus on first. And that's where we landed on the design to construction data exchange. And that was the focus of our phase 1 efforts. And the purpose of this data exchange is to enable contractors to prepare their bids and execute construction. So again, the framework that we're thinking of is design, bid, build, and we focused on that single data exchange. Phase 2 is essentially continuation of the same type of work. It's just was a separate funding mechanism, and that project is from 2024 through 2028 with very similar goals and objectives. We are continuing to advance those initial standards and also tackling additional data exchanges. So we got that same process map, and now the pooled fund has selected the other data exchanges that we will be focusing on. And these are the data exchanges that follow design to construction, so more in the fabrication and construction realm and ultimately capturing as-built information. So this is a summary of the priority data exchanges. It's the same ones that were identified in the process map, just summarized here in a single box. So at the bottom is the construction contract model, another name for that design to construction exchange. That was our focus in phase 1, where we developed an IDM, IDS, and data dictionary content. And we issued those work products, but we are also refining them now in phase 2, and I'll talk more about that later. In phase 2, we plan to tackle these additional 3 exchanges, and collectively they would all be necessary components of an as-built data set. So I'll talk a little bit more about our current focus and what we're doing in phase 2. So there's 3 focus areas. The first is data standards development. That is the primary focus of our work. And then there's 2 other areas, state DOT pilot project support and external stakeholder collaboration. And really these 2 other tasks are mechanisms to support our primary goal of data standards development. For state DOT pilot project support, our team is providing more advisory support to the pilot projects that you'll be hearing more about tomorrow morning, projects that were recent or ongoing or recently advertised for construction, and then future pilot projects that are in the pipeline. External stakeholder collaboration is super important. I'll talk more about how we're going to do that, but that is to get input from certain stakeholders to assist us with our primary task. So let's look at data standards development at a high level first. So these are our technical tasks at a glance throughout the 4 years or so of the phase 2 efforts. Last year, which was the first year of the phase 2 effort, we focused on these first 2 tasks, establishing a methodology and evaluating those priority data exchanges. So we did the work that we set out to accomplish in phase 1, but we really wanted to document a methodology and make sure we have a clear process on how we need to do things. It was a little challenging the first go around, but we learned a lot. And so we documented that methodology last year. And we also held a series of workshops with the technical team at Building Smart International to get their input as well, to make sure they were supportive and agreed with our general approach to doing the work. So that was really critical. And then, like I showed earlier, we have those priority data exchanges, and we selected those last year. The remainder of the tasks are ongoing or upcoming, but developing those data standards and then getting input from those stakeholders that I'll talk about in a few minutes, and also coordinating with software vendors, software developers, and making some updates. It's an iterative process. And then ultimately, we want to share the draft products for industry use. And we've talked about that a lot this week, about how it's important to get those standards out there for people to use and provide feedback. Not everything can be seamless and perfect. We've learned that. So we want to get that input and refine what we're doing before formally publishing and formally adopting these standards. So that's kind of a high level view of the tasks that we are doing in phase 2. And now I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. And I want to thank Grant Schmitz from my team who's here today, who put these slides together and presented some of this information yesterday. So I just pulled a few things to highlight today. He got into a lot more detail yesterday for the pooled fund group, but I know there's a lot of interest in what we're doing, and I want to provide just a little bit of insight into some of the technical work that we're doing. So I mentioned refining the phase 1 work products. So the pooled fund leadership really recognized the importance of the work that was done in phase 1, and that we learned a lot from the pilot projects that utilize those phase 1 products. So we wanted to leverage that feedback to really refine what we had done, which will set the stage for more success in developing the next set of standards for those additional data exchanges. So that is why we are going back to do these refinements. And there's a number of things that we are updating. So I'm going to walk through most of these to kind of show you what we've been working on. The first one is further developing the US Bridge IFC mapping spreadsheet. So that's what we're calling this spreadsheet. And I'll talk a little bit about what this is. So this mapping, what is a mapping table? Well, one purpose is to define the spatial structure for bridges and structures within this IFC format. So this is a screenshot from our spreadsheet. And if you can see the red outline, this is showing the spatial hierarchy. I know you can't really read the words, but this is really important to define the spatial containment of our models that are compliant with the IFC schema and how we want it to look for our data exchange. So what you can't see is that it's showing a hierarchy of project, site, bridge, superstructure, deck within that red box. Now, I've talked to a lot of people who are really excited about this spreadsheet. Someone in this room told me earlier that this spreadsheet is awesome. There he is. And so it's really hard to convey the excitement about a spreadsheet in a technical presentation, but take my word for it, people are really excited about this. This is also very consumable by structural engineers that need to provide input. So we've worked with structural engineers, meaning the pooled fund representatives that we're working with and they can review this. They understand spreadsheets. I'm a structural engineer. I love a great spreadsheet. And so this has been very effective to capturing all the information that we need. So there's other things in this mapping table. It also specifies the objects, the actual modeled objects. So that's the next portion of the spreadsheet within the red box here. So a few examples of modeled objects would be slab and guardrail and girders, just to name a few. Lastly, I wanted to highlight that a mapping table that we're putting together here also shows the IFC mapping. So this is something that we improved upon, I would say, from phase 1, where it wasn't really clear like who was responsible for identifying this IFC mapping. And we've decided that we really need to outline this right here in this spreadsheet. So the rightmost column on the screen here is defining which IFC, what the IFC mapping is. So for an example, I could see this on my computer, but it's a little small here. You know, it's taking, for example, deck, and then there's a slab maps to IFC slab.floor, apparently. So somebody went through the IFC schema who understands it and is able to translate the modeled object and the IFC that it needs to map to. So it's very technical, but there's a lot of people, some in this room that are really excited about this. Just remember that. Okay, and they could probably talk all day about this. So what does this mean? Well, by having this standardized format, there's a few different softwares shown here on this slide, and there's some code. The code that's highlighted would be the same for all the software when they export the model in an IFC format. And so then a viewer, such as BIM Vision that's shown here, but it could be any viewer, can read that code and display that information in the same way. So that's why this is important. So the next thing on the list that we've been updating is revamping our US Bridge Data Dictionary workbook. It's important to note that the BSDD service is just a service, right? But the people who create the dictionaries are also the owners of that content. So even if we upload something to the BSDD service, it's still owned by whoever created it in the first place. And that's more of a governance issue. But the actual creation of the data dictionary content is what our team is working on. So this is just another snippet from that same spreadsheet, but we're identifying a particular object. This one happens to be highlighting pile cap. It's showing the IFC mapping, which we already talked about, but on the far right, there's a link. And that link takes us to another workbook that outlines all the information associated with pile cap that we need for the data dictionary. There's an IFC name, a data dictionary name, which is just pile cap with no spaces, and a description of what a pile cap is. It also contains all the IFC attributes. So that's important information for the data dictionary. The data dictionary workbook also contains property sets, defines the property sets that we need for these modeled objects. And this is an example of a property set that's defined already in IFC. So anything defined in IFC has a property set name that starts with PSET. So that's how you know it's already in IFC. But we also need a number of custom property sets, and that's in our spreadsheet as well. So we recognize that we needed a new property set for footing. So the prefix for this property set is US Bridge, and that's how we know it's a custom property set. So our team has been working very hard over the last few months, really enhancing the spreadsheet, making it into a format that is useful, not only for us to develop, also for people to review. And so just a few statistics we have in our data dictionary, we have 169 unique entities and more than 300 custom properties. Now that's not exciting because we don't want to have a lot of custom properties, but that's just the reality right now. As the IFC schema is expanded to support more bridge and infrastructure objects, we hope that the need for custom properties will reduce over time. So just a few more things that we've been working on, the IDM or Information Delivery Manual, getting that content of the US Bridge Data Dictionary onto the BSDD service, and then enhancing our IDS. So I wanted to point out this graphic as well. So the spreadsheets and workbook that I was showing are represented in those green boxes, the IFC mapping spreadsheet and the IFC data dictionary workbook. These are tied together. That in the green boxes there, that's our single source of truth. And then we're using these items to develop the work products on the right, the IDM, the BSDD content, and the IDS. So this is really important because we learned from phase one that we kind of started with an information delivery manual, and it was published by AASHTO, which was great, but it was then a static document. And as we worked on other products, we may need to refine a few things, make some changes, but we were kind of stuck because we had already finished the IDM and now we were working on the IDS or something else. So this new process will allow us to make sure we're developing everything and we have consistency between the three things and this one-to-one-to-one relationship, as we call it. So our information delivery manual has a few different sections. The first three sections are more of a narrative, so I'm not talking about that today, but section 4 is the part that contains the exchange requirements in a tabular format. So that is the part that we have been focusing on. And the IDM will contain in some way the hierarchy that I was showing in our IFC mapping table. Whether it's included as an attached Excel file or maybe some other format or printed to PDF, those are things that we are discussing, but in some fashion, it will be included in our IDM. Likewise, in some fashion, the data dictionary content will be included in the IDM. IDS is another work product, and I just wanted to share an example of what this looks like. So this is a screenshot from our IDS, and there's a couple of ways to view an IDS. On the left is the human readable PDF version of it, and it's listing a variety of properties and such, and whether they must be present or they may be present. But in the back end, there's computer code, this computer interpretable XML, that's on the right side. Software developers might appreciate that, but most of us, couldn't read it, I suppose. So we have an IDS, but then what does it look like if we actually import an IFC file, and we have an IDS viewer that can run those checks. The IDS does that verification process, and you can't really see exactly the details on the right half, but that's showing the output of running the IDS. There's a series of check marks, things that passed that verification, and some X's, meaning there's a problem with the file and being in conformance with that IDS. So our the first IDS for design to construction was developed in January of 2024. And some pilot projects were starting up right around that time frame. And so we were able to start improving that IDS right away in coordination with those project teams. And we did that, and they were able to use the IDS. At the time, and I guess still for now, we have one IDS that covers all the requirements for the design to construction exchange. However, what we have learned is that it would be more effective to break down the IDS into smaller components to make it more effective. For instance, if you have a particular type of bridge, a steel bridge, you know, if you have all these concrete requirements for concrete girders, you know, they have to be optional. So everything becomes optional if you have too many options. So we are looking to have a more modular approach and have individual IDSs for different components, maybe for the deck, maybe for steel girder superstructure, and so forth. So that is something that we are also working on. Also, I wanted to mention that having an IDS at the national level is really the baseline. DOTs may choose to add or make some modifications that conform with their preferences within their state. So you can think of this how we have a national design specification for designing bridges, but we have states have their individual bridge design manuals that make some tweaks to that process based on their own needs. Computer science degree is not required to modify an IDS. I've been told this by many people. Aiden in the morning mentioned that he was able to create an IDS and it wasn't that hard. So we'll take their word for it and you know, not be scared of having IDSs being you know, tweaked at the state level. But having that national baseline is important, and that's what we're working on. All right, so I mentioned pilot project support. These are the projects that are ongoing or recently completed. You'll be hearing from some or all of these tomorrow morning, but these are the projects that specifically that we have coordinated with, both to provide guidance to the teams, but also to get that feedback. So there's 2 projects from Pennsylvania and 1 from Iowa that we have collaborated with. So again, getting that feedback from the pilot projects has been really important so that we can refine our design to construction deliverables from phase 1, and that's what we've been working on recently. And this is all foundational work to really improve the effectiveness of our next set of data standards. We want to have that correct approach so that moving forward with the new data exchanges, we're doing it in the right way. All right, so I talked about the IDM a little bit. This is just a kind of a summary showing the different components of the IDM, and most of it is planning to remain similar to how it was published back in 2023, January of 2023. But that section 4, the exchange requirements, is the part that's going to change the most. Okay, touch on, we're okay for time. We're still ahead of schedule. Okay. The time is wrong. Because we were ahead of schedule, right? So this is 2 to 2:30. Okay. Okay. We're on track, no worries. Okay. So external stakeholder collaboration. All right, so what are we doing here? There's kind of 2 components of our collaboration: industry advisory group and a technical working group. So both of these types of collaboration are important. We want to work with an industry advisory group to really get that buy-in from key industry stakeholders more at the executive level, to get that leadership buy-in in what we're doing. we do need support from the industry. So we want to have that strategic support. And then we're leveraging those connections to establish a technical working group, the people that will help us and provide input on different aspects of our work. We plan to hold frequent meetings with this group, and they will provide that technical feedback. So industry advisory group this is our plan to include the contractors. We have AGC and ARTBA included, and ACEC on the consulting side. And then for bridges, the two other groups that are important are NSBA and NCBC. And I'll talk about those for a brief moment in case you're not familiar. So NCBC, National Concrete Bridge Council, is an umbrella organization, and its members are comprised of various other specialty concrete industry groups. Just to name a few, like Precast Concrete Institute, PCI, is a member. We have CRSI, Concrete Reinforcing Steel Institute. ASB is the American Segmental Bridge Institute. So these organizations are all members of NCBC so that they can collaborate at the national level. So that is the group we are coordinating with for concrete. And then for steel, NSBA is the bridge arm of the American Institute of Steel Construction. And their membership is a little bit different. It's more private entities that are members of NSBA, for example, steel fabricators, service centers, and the like. So a little bit on our technical working group. We will have participation from the steel and concrete industry groups that I just mentioned. We've already solidified about 2/3 of this group, and we're just finalizing a few more folks. It's not a huge group, just 15 to 18 members, but we will be expecting them to, commit about 8 hours a month to support our team. The last thing I want to mention is that we have been engaging with technology providers since the start. We want to make sure they understand what the pooled fund efforts are all about. And we've had a stakeholder, a software vendor engagement program as part of our project. And it's been a little bit on pause as we make some refinements, but we do have contact with at least 24 participating software developers on the screen. So the last thing I'm going to highlight is just a little more detail about the 2025 BSI openBIM awards and the one that relates to this pooled fund effort. And I'm going to ask Alexa actually to speak about this because it's pretty cool to highlight what has been done and the impact to our industry.
It is on, okay. All right, so thanks Aiden for introducing this earlier today. And I just want to give you a little bit more context on this particular project. So HDR, in collaboration with PennDOT, Iowa DOT, Michael Baker, and JMT, submitted an application for this award. And it was quite comprehensive, right? The application process is not trivial. It requires a lot of evidence to show how we are using openBIM in these projects. And so what you're seeing on the screen is the workflow that the pool fund produced as part of the phase 1 products that was shared with each of the design teams to test, document challenges, best practices, interim solutions until everything is working perfectly and you just have that one button that works, right? And also document lessons learned, right? And so that is what we were testing. So if we go to the next slide. I'm not gonna talk much about the projects because you're gonna hear about them tomorrow. But essentially, the process that we were testing was for each project team to develop their 3D model in their software of their choice. And just like they've done for a long time, and through the PennDOT process, we were following that particularly, and then establish those workflows for that particular software that they were using to export these IFC files that could be used either as a contractual deliverable or for reference information. So that's what that we're trying to do, and some of the things that we're going to do afterwards with the ADCMS grant from PennDOT is produce training materials to go along with this. So that was the project that we submitted. So we're really excited that we really had a lot of great lessons learned, and we had great outcomes already from these pilot projects. And so I think the beauty of this particular project, and the reason why we thought it was a great project for an award nomination, is that as a nation, we're standardizing the way that we produce these IFC files for bridges. And so that allows every design team to do what they need to do, as Julie was saying earlier, right, to deliver their projects. And then also, it's really gonna give us more freedom, right, to use the right tools for the right job. And we are learning that we're just enhancing collaboration. We always collaborate as project teams. That's always been the case on all these, project delivery. But now we have an opportunity to enhance that collaboration a lot more with these particular deliverables. And as Aiden mentioned, we were selected as one of the 3 finalists. And so Joe Brenner and I had the privilege to present in Berlin to the jurors to why they should select our project. And we received a special mention, as Aiden mentioned today. So yeah, so that was a project, Julie. So thank you.
Thank you. That's it. We'll do Q&A at the end of the session. So thank you very much. Oh, wait, Jim's not
No, I'll
done.
be quiet. I'll
Are
say
you-
that. How much time do we have?
Be careful. 13 minutes.
Still, okay, high level, I'll be real quick. When I mentioned we were focused, as I mentioned, we're really focused on getting deliverables. If you ask the team, because they want it, well, we need this research material. So we developed like 4 tracks of research outlines, and I'm like, well, that's not the objective of the pooled fund. We need to do the IDS data dictionaries, and we've done it. The team has done a tremendous job of doing that and piloting. But, we need more resources on this. They said it supported the pile. Well, these first 2 pilots were supported, kind of, it was worked, and a lot of it was extra. We had coordination meetings with software vendors and all of that. But going forward, I mentioned we had 6-7 states going to be piloting this in FY27. That hopefully will be including the fabrication exchange. And so the pooled fund can't be spending money and resources, supporting all these states individually. And that's where we really need to step up and really try to find the resources to get this stuff done. And as another add-on item to that is, when we're coordinating with these software vendors, we need to meet with one voice. We can't have 50 states meeting individually and saying, we need this, but we also need the software vendors at the table. And if there's a software vendor that disagrees with anything I've said, please raise your hand and let me know. So, that's another item we need to, that Excel sheet, there was a lot of people excited about that. Rick was one of them, that mapping, and that is really the important part of this. Once you have that, if a standard changes, you still have all that, all that work defining all those data and requirements. That is very, that is very important and kind of the bread and butter and the backbone of everything. Sorry, I had to use my name tag to take notes. It's kind of small. And the coordination, I can't say enough how well Michael Baker and HDR coordinated on those 3 pilot projects, getting this and a joint submittal on that grant. It was great teamwork, and that's really what's needed to get this done. And I'm really excited about getting to this fabrication. So, we keep talking about return on investment. Here is a defined, our CAD techs and our engineers ask, what's in it for me? Why are we producing this model? Well, we get to fabrication, here we are. It accelerates the lead time for steel fabrication. I mentioned earlier, we have a bridge over the Mississippi River and I was a little off. It only has 128,000 field installed bolts. Some of the nodes have 8 different bolt links in them. So tracking all that, you know, the bulk, you know, every supplier complains about short lead times from the supplier before 'em. And this helps solve to all of that and actually is a return on investment and reduce errors. So this is really getting, you know, where the, you know, the pavement hits the road, and that's why I'm excited about it. I think I better be quiet now. We have the exit music now. You know, what's that?
Yeah, what are you asking?
I got a software validation file. So I got 10 minutes later, and I won't have a friend helping me.
Thank you, Jim. Next up, Transportation Pool Fund, BIM for Infrastructure. There comes John. With John will be Matt and Abhishek.
Sure.
Okay, so do a committee in construction, take a cue from them and just tell a joke to start. Some of you have probably heard this one before, but there's two types of data scientists, those that can extrapolate information from incomplete data sets. Anyways, so I'm Matt Miller. I'm the Director of New and Emerging Transportation Technologies. I found myself in this study champion position because I congratulated Mike on his retirement, and he was leaving design and he was taking his assistant with him. And there was a bit of a hole to be filled. And this work actually really aligns with a lot of the other things that I'm doing. And I'll talk a little bit about those. So we are the BIM for everything else pooled fund, infrastructure. So, you know, it's been around for a couple of years, not quite as long as Bridge. So we've got the advantage of learning from Bridge and taking every bit of advice they can offer, and really appreciate that them sitting in on some of our meetings and helping keep us in a straight direction and get the things done that we need to focus on. But at the same time, our problems are a little bit different than theirs. So we have different work products. What is the pooled fund creating? How do you access those products? And we do have a really nice clearinghouse. They've actually just added an AI chatbot. Now, it's like a lot of your AI chatbots, it's got limited functionality because we don't want it to make things up or pull in other data. But you know, that could be a really handy source when you're just looking for a quick bit of information. The product development approach, we've got modular development by engineering discipline, data dictionary, data models, exchange information. Anyways, I'm sure you guys love hearing all about models and everything, but the point is we've got a lot of work that we're doing, and we had a really aggressive target, and we didn't necessarily hit it for this year. We're gonna have to make up some ground in the next year, but you know, if you want to make change, you gotta set those aggressive benchmarks, right? So we got this map, and this may be a little bit old. We were kind of they kind of let us know, but anyways, I don't really need to talk about this since this map has already been shown, but you get an idea. Anyways, the National Strategic Roadmap for Advancing BIM for Infrastructure, we've got a focus on the life cycle of BIM. And I can tell you personally, coming in, this design to construction was really helpful. For me being in construction, having that source data, because when you'd be out there recollecting this information all over again, you collect worse information. You lose a lot of data in that process. And now from the position that I'm coming from in operations, I have to think about how an autonomous vehicle is going to travel on a roadway. And there's parts of the asset inventory that I want to capture from your guys' information. We did a study on I-80 and I-35 for just event data. One state had 43 data fields for truck parking. How many ways can you say that there's an open stall at a rest area? So we want to avoid this as we're working through this process. So I'm really grateful that there's everybody here talking about this, even though we have a lot of issues to deal with. So, okay, this slide was changed. I downloaded it earlier because the notes were up, but anyways, we've got the FHWA and national programs, software and technology providers, data standards organizations and industry groups. And John, you're going to get into this a little bit. So I'm not going to go too deep into it. Anyways, what is the crossover between the two pooled funds? You'll see that there's a lot of information that is overlapped, and where can we come together and agree on things, and probably more than just about anything, at least what's really been kind of a popular point of discussion this year has kind of been alignments and the need for a common alignment as we put these two models together. But we do have okay. Well, it's you, John. Anyhow.
All right. I think to that point, right, there's push the button, sorry. There's a lot of stakeholder engagement that we're trying to align on, and that was a lot of the discussion yesterday, and we're planning on following up on that, you know, later in the week. But there are different things. OGC drives more of what you're doing when you're dealing with more linear objects. Paving associations get a little bit more involved, but that's still kind of covered collectively, potentially under some of the partners in AGC and ARPA, hopefully. So just different groups, but we want to align and start engaging with vendors at the same level, like the high level, and then build out from that. Because we're really doing the same types of things, just for different types of objects, right? We're delivering information delivery manuals. We're learning from what BIM for Bridges has done. I think they covered that pretty well. Kind of got to work on the data dictionary, the IDM and the IDS together, right? We have kind of a data dictionary kind of built out, and it's a bunch of spreadsheets that kind of interact with each other. We're dealing with drainage structures, roadway geometry, roadway features, and several other items. And it's harder to bring those together. You can in a spreadsheet. So how do we make it more consumable and easy to see the relationships between those? Well, we're also realizing you need to make sure you put that in the IDM and start tying those together and build the IDS at the same time. So really our roadmap, kind of at a high level, year one, we had, like, as Matt said, a little bit different scenario, right? Classification structures aren't necessarily established for these other items. So, and understanding and knowledge, right? And so really did a lot of foundation setting, creating some guidance documents, not only for data standardization, but also how do we move together at the same time to pilot and test BIM in general, right? Then we started focusing on really getting to developing that IDM. We did a bunch of really evaluating and prioritizing which use cases. I think we had, like, I don't know, 41 exchanges or something like that in our base process map. We did one for rehab, reconstruction, etc. And so we grouped those into kind of use cases that we had the pooled fund kind of prioritized by feasibility and desirability going into year two. And it came out with digital as-built and design and construction were kind of the top two. There were some things that were highly desirable, but not necessarily feasible. And there were some things that I think some of the construction things were, because the processes just weren't quite there yet. And so then we get into year three. The goal was to have those IDSs ready. That's where we are today. And as Matt alluded to, because we were trying to do design to construction and digital as-built together, you get those people in the same room trying to talk about the same asset and the same objects. They have a different perspective on them, and we found ourselves talking across each other a lot. So we decided that we need to focus on design and construction and go pick up digital as-built, with the hope that in the end, right, we're working on a data dictionary, data standardization that kind of gets us there.
So I had this slide online before. So I did want to say one thing that's really interesting. Well, we did have some of the year 2 with the IDMs, of course, that was carried over, and Abhishek will speak to that. But really, like year 5, ITS becomes part of this, and that's so important with ITS architecture that impacts your federal funding for your ITS groups and how they can get grants. But we had a Tesla, well, I should say we had a pavement marking truck that was hit by a semi, and it painted a line going off the roadway. And then I think it was a day later, we had a Tesla follow that line right off the roadway. So when you think about it, you know, the sensors, the cameras, they're great, but you know, if a sign is vandalized or knocked over, you have a derecho come through or something like this, you kind of need this digital infrastructure to support these vehicles as we move forward. So I just wanted to put that out there. But that year 5, whether I'm the study champion at that point or not, I'm definitely going to be involved with this group, hopefully.
Well, and I think that's a good connection, right? Because we're really looking at a lot of different assets, right? And so as you get into we really want to try to get them at a higher level, right? And align them. And then as you get into year 5, where do we extend out, right? Or is it a use case, or is it a grouping of assets and going more into the detail? When we started looking at transportation management systems, right, we started engaging, and there's standards getting developed on that, but they're less mature kind of on the physical asset side of it. So we kind of wanted to establish that structure of where it would fit into what we're developing and let that continue to develop where it's developing and try to align back up later. So that's really getting into year 4 or 5. But really what we're hoping, and we'll kind of get into this a little bit more later, but towards the beginning of the year, as we come around, we'll have some of this out ready to test and validate. So this is going back to that foundation setting. This is really kind of equating what the states need to understand and learn in year 1 to really get to a common data interoperability, right? How can we exchange data across platforms, across use cases, across processes? You kind of start down in the middle there with the process model. You got to establish what is the process? What are you talking about? And then relate those to exchanges, right? Your use case. And then with that, you start you prioritize those, right? And you start to develop the data dictionary and the information requirements. And then you go around to the side and you start figuring out what data models are supplying that information. And then you start mapping it into the IDMs and the IDS. Really, the data dictionary, IDM, IDS are kind of getting developed kind of together. And so we started looking at this and going, okay, let's clarify this for the users. Here's where the process model deliverables are from year 1. Here's where the use case and the exchange processes live. You have some of those deliverables in there. Here's where we're getting the data, the tools people are using. We did it by user and part of the process to capture the tools that the states were using, so that we can use that as initial test and validation as we're developing prototypes. What are those information requirements relating to the process? Really understanding what is ISC and how it relates to BIM, and how to create a data dictionary. So these are some of those deliverables: governance, how to establish one source of truth, and then really getting into what is an IDM, right? Pulling over some information from some of those experts. So that was great. And then we had these BIM enablement deliverables that pilot projects and how to pilot BIM, right? And then of course we tried to put forth a guidebook, and we talked a lot about this on Monday. The processes that exist don't lend themselves to digital artifacts or digital processes, because we said, hey, we want to update this again in 2 years, and AASHTO says no, that's not our process, right? So we had to pivot, and we decided to create this clearinghouse and put this knowledge platform in there so that people can consume that information in a more readily available environment. So this is what I'm going to go over next. This is where that is. Our deliverables all live in there. You can search by the deliverable. A lot of these are living drafts that are intended to be updated because we know that industry hasn't completely matured enough to really say that this is evidence-based and this works. I think one of the things we talked about earlier, digital sign and sealing, right? Really, blockchain is going to help solve some of those, but you can do it with different processes. Just know the limitations of what you're doing. There's a deliverable for that. But inside there, there's this knowledge platform, you know, as a chatbot, as we were alluding to earlier. So I had an argument last Thursday, just making sure that everybody understands what's in there. I pretended I had my hat on back in 2014 and I was a state really going on this BIM for infrastructure journey. So how do I start? And so it came back and it gave me this. And the first thing it says, you need a pilot, and then you need to conduct more pilots, and then do a readiness assessment, and then engage stakeholders. And like that can work, right? You kind of need to know what you're doing out there and feel your industry. And I was like, but really, there's a lot of going on out there already. Can't I leverage that and do my readiness earlier, right? So I asked you another question. That's why I said I know 10 states have done this, right? So why do I have to do readiness and stakeholder engagement in step 3 and 4? And it said, well, every state's different. So you got to tell your approach. You really need to know what that is. Your stakeholders might have different dynamics. You know, all these things are true. They're not necessarily wrong. So we're getting closer, right? And so then I was like, okay, fine. All right, let me be more specific. All states build roadways, right? So why can't I start with readiness from what some of my other peers have done, and determine whether or not I actually have champions, or I need to train people so they can move, that we can move forward. So with this adjustment, you know, it looks like we're about to hit the goal, right? We're about to make the basket. You're not sure looking at that picture. So the final output, okay, fine, you're right. You should probably assess readiness first, engage with your stakeholders, and then continue to pilot till you get to deployment, right? I provide this as an example of what you could do and use this for, right? It's a AI chatbot, right? So it only knows what it has. There's other information that can come into it, and make it stronger, right? The intent of this is for it to live beyond the pooled fund in theory. So we have to create processes around curating that information and adding it into it. So if you have ideas, reach out to somebody on the pooled fund and we'll work through that. And at that point, I'll turn it over to Abhishek to get into some of the specifics.
All right, so this next part is going to get in a little bit into the weeds and specifically, we're going to pick 3 of the work products that this pool fund is developing. That's the data dictionary and the exchange information requirements, the IDMs and the IDSs. We got enough of a rundown in Aiden's session about what these are, but we'll still show you some visuals of these things. Yesterday, when the pool fund met, we got into each one of these deliverables and we started talking about specific sections and these deliverables and how do they look like. And that's here, we're just going to show you a snapshot of these things just to present the picture of what they are going to contain and some information about those deliverables. So the first thing that we want to understand on the far right over there is essentially that when we are dealing with roads and when we started talking about that we are the everything else for infrastructure pool fund, we are basically looking at multiple roadway engineering disciplines that basically gets into traffic, utilities and drainage, that gets into geotechnical, earthwork and grading, that gets into roadway geometry and the alignment information, the roadway features that are actually both longitudinally along the direction of the road as well as laterally are changing by travel lane. That includes curbs, sidewalks, gutters, essentially your crosswalks, your travel lanes, your pavement surface, your medians. So we have got a lot of things. That's everything else. And when we say everything else, that's a lot that we are trying to cover. So what we have done here is we want to take a modular approach to basically developing the data dictionary for roads, developing the IDM and the IDS. And what that modular approach basically is about is we cannot take all of these elements for the road infrastructure and create this one big IDM and one big IDS and one big data dictionary and then test it out. We have to incrementally add all of these pieces into our IDM, into our IDS. go and run that IDS against the validator, go and run that IDM against the testing that we need to do, run them against the models that are there, that are being created by the state DOTs as part of the pilot projects, the ADCMS pilots, for example, and test out whether these IDSs are actually extracting the pieces of information that we really need to extract or not. So that's really the modular structure that we are talking about here. So the first thing we basically say is, okay, along all of these lines or rows, if you may, let's identify each one of those individual engineering disciplines that we are going to have to actually look at when we talk about developing an IDM and an IDS in a data dictionary for. The next thing we would have to look at is what exactly are the steps involved in developing an IDS and an IDS and an IDS. So we know on the far right here, we have got the IDM and the IDS, that's our destination. But in order to get there, we first need those process information models or process information architecture information. What are those process models? We saw that in the previous presentation when the BIM for Bridges Pool Fund talked about the digital workflows infographic that was created. A similar infographic was created by the BIM for Infrastructure Pool Fund that basically identified all the steps starting from project planning to survey to basically creating an initial roadway geometry model, and then all of these disciplines coming in and building their own models, everything coming together, running the clash detection, and then finally creating a model that can be put out for construction as part of the model as a legal document process or just as part of the letting process that we're talking about. So this process information architecture actually laid out all of those steps, and it laid out over 40 data exchanges that happen in this entire process. And those 40 information exchanges were basically also identifying every single data model that is getting created by the traffic discipline, by the roadway discipline, and so on and so forth, all of those disciplines for that matter. That process information architecture establishes what are the points of data exchange that are going to be in this digital process that we are talking about, in this digital project delivery process that we are essentially talking about. And what are the information exchange requirements that we really need to care about corresponding to each one of those exchanges that are happening between whatever stakeholders are involved in those processes. So if the traffic guys are basically starting to create a traffic engineering model, and a utilities person is basically creating one of those, did they start with the roadway alignment model that was created by the roadway design team? Did the roadway alignment model also get used by somebody else that is actually part of the workflow for that matter? Those are also exchanges that we took into consideration. So that process information architecture is a formal BPMN process, business process modeling network process, standard-based architecture that was created. The exchange information requirements were cataloged corresponding to each one of the exchanges that are involved, each one of those 40 exchanges for that matter. And then they were actually put into a database so that we can know, here are our models, here are our exchanges, here are our process steps, here are our stakeholders, here are our roles and responsibilities that are associated with that. That actually sets us up to basically now start looking at some of the process models, the data models that are specifically involved in the exchange during design to construction, and then from construction to asset management, which is the digital as-built process. So this pool fund is looking at two of those exchanges. One is that design to construction exchange. The second is the exchange from construction to asset management, which is the digital as-built data model delivery. So those data models were identified, and then we started looking into collecting some models from the pilot projects the states have done. So we have coordinated with 3 or 4 states right now to basically identify the ADCMS pilots or any other pilots that the states are doing. We are basically looking at what models were created as part of that, and then could those models actually be used as the starting point to evaluate these IDMs and IDSs that we're developing. So those data models were identified next. Then we started getting into the data dictionary. And when we started looking into the data dictionary, there were many standards that were actually available that are specific to each one of the disciplines. So for roads, for example, there are national standards like the model inventory of roadway elements, the Meyer. There is standard on MUTCD that talks about signs. There is standard, which is an HPMS, which basically talks about the roadway characteristics and the attributes that need to be part of it. And there are several other standards. Of course, there's IFC that we have to map it, everything to. So when we looked at the data dictionary development, we started with existing standards and we said, let's bring all of those standards, all of those model elements, all of those attributes to the table alongside IFC classes and IFC attributes and property sets. And then let's create a data dictionary building off of those standards and then have a discussion with the states. We had a round of about 10 or 15 meetings with various states, essentially pulling together all of these discipline-specific subject matter experts and talking about here is what is it that we are trying to exchange from design to construction? What is it that we need to agree on in terms of the terms and definitions and the data objects and properties that we need to have in the model when we are talking about design to construction exchange. So that is what was involved in creating the data dictionary. It's still a living product. It's still something that we constantly evolve and update, but we have a draft that basically has been circulated across at least the committee and the states that are involved in the pool fund to basically review how this data dictionary lines up with the pilots that we are doing across the states. So now that data dictionary and open standard step is something that we're working on. The exchange information requirements are specifically focused on the two exchanges that we're talking about. So the data dictionary is the expansive documentation that has, and in the next slide we'll cover this, is the expansive documentation of all the data attributes and properties that are uniquely identified using a unique resource identifier, a URI, or an ID. But exchange information requirement is then tapping into that data dictionary and basically saying, here is the piece of information in my big data dictionary that needs to be essentially focused on when we talk about sending data from design to construction. And here are the data items that we need to focus on when we talk about digital as-bills and handing over from construction to asset management. So exchange information requirements is the next piece we look at. That sets us up for creating these IDSs and IDM, which essentially establish here's the information exchange specification in a computer readable format. And here is the reference guide or the document, the PDF or the Word document that essentially describes what is in that IDS, if you may. So that's the process that we follow for each one of those disciplines and all the data items that have been identified. So this is a slide that just basically gets into a little bit more detail about what those artifacts contain. When we say data dictionary, this is something that should start with every single property, every single data item identified by a unique resource identifier that we can say, that we can use to literally track any changes to any element of the data dictionary and maintain versions of the updates that are being done to that. There is information about property, the elements that the properties are associated with. There is information about the classification system. This is where omni-class and unique-class classification systems essentially come in. And then the definition of the properties and the elements that we are associated with. The exchange information requirement then does a referencing to the data dictionary and basically says these are the items that we are going to pull from the data dictionary and tap them into the data design to construction exchange and then to the digital as-bills exchange. So exchange information requirements have a little bit more information about process steps that are associated, the conditions that are triggering the exchange, and how the exchange actually happens. So all of that information that gets into the IDM specification. There are templates that we are utilizing. These are all Building Smart International specified templates for IDM and IDSs, and these are sections that we are actually filling up based on those specifications and those templates as far as these documents are concerned. Okay, so those are the two fundamental pieces that we start with, and then we get into the IDM and IDS. We are simultaneously developing the IDM and IDS together because the intent here is that the IDS is this machine readable document and the IDM is that human readable document. The IDS is being created so that we can test it with software. The IDM is being created so that we can actually put all the information about those exchange requirements so that somebody can go through it and ensure that this is correct as well. So same content, but different purposes in terms of how we want to use these documents for that matter. IDS can actually be imported into software and can be used to extract information from the models. And that's why the machine readability part of it becomes very important. But as far as an IDM is concerned, that's something that we as engineers can review, as well as data architects can review and say, okay, here is how we are leveraging open standards like IFC. So that's how it goes. So next few slides will actually present these artifacts, and we'll start with the data dictionary here. So this is a slide that shows the similar data dictionary as the BIM for bridges and structures pool fund is utilizing. I'm not going to go over the color combinations because they're exactly the same thing as what Julie covered. This is where the two pool funds are absolutely aligned in terms of standards, in terms of basically ensuring that we are collaborating with each other and these work products are being created in the same way. And this was actually shared by the BIM for Bridges and Structures Pool Fund with us so that we can actually leverage the same formats as well. So again, what we see here on the far right is the list of all the different roadway features, or for that matter, what are the specific layers that we are actually looking at identifying. So for pavement surface, for example, it goes on and identifies the top layer, base layer, and so on and so forth. So again, something that was presented as the data dictionary workbook in the previous session, we essentially have something similar that has been created for the roadway. And this has now been created for all of those disciplines that you saw in the previous slide. We also have the IFC mapping information. We talked about the IFC mapping table in the previous session, and this is exactly that piece of information. So here we are looking at IFC classes like IFC road part, IFC distribution elements for various model elements that have been actually included in the data dictionary corresponding to each one of the data elements that are part of the model, as far as that is concerned. We have gone through about 1,400 plus IFC classes, out of which 869 of those IFC classes are in the alignment-based view, and further drilling down into the functional parts that Aidan talked about earlier in the day that are specifically focused on what are the IFC classes we need to use for georeferencing, what are the IFC classes we need to use for assemblies. And so everything is basically being built on top of the documentation and the framework that has been provided by Building Smart in terms of the mapping of the IFC classes to the model elements that we are looking at over here. Okay, so that was the part where we have now actually identified here is all the information that we need to put exchange from design to construction, or from construction to asset management. The next piece is to basically look at the models that have been created by the states and look at whether our data dictionaries and whether our IFC mappings are lining up with what with the models that the states are creating. So we have started collecting these models from the pilots, from wherever they are available, from across states, and we have started going through essentially what is the hierarchy of information that is actually presented in these models. Can we actually map those model elements into specific elements into the data dictionary? And can we map those to those specific IFC classes, to the definitions as defined in the IFC documentation, line up with what we are actually using in our workspaces and our design models across projects in the United States? And this is the part where the screenshot just essentially highlights that when we are looking at a particular road model here, we are looking at the alignment that's represented by the blue line. We are looking at how objects are referenced using that alignment, how the thickness of the pavement is actually being represented in the model, and do we have those corresponding elements in the data dictionary, and then do we have those elements in the IDM and IDS as well? So this is more specific applicability testing that we are doing in terms of models and the IDM and IDS alignment that we are trying to do here. Okay. One of the most critical lessons that we have learned is, and this is something that is basic common sense as well, but still we have to ensure that we are following this as good and best practice, is the fact that IDM and IDS have to be developed together simultaneously for each one of those pieces. And this is something that both pool funds, I think we were lucky, we learned a lot from the BIM for Bridges and Structures Pool Fund in terms of their experience in building the IDM and IDS. So we were able to leverage that, but we also understood that, yes, we need to actually build these together. We need to simultaneously test them together. The software that was actually presented earlier by Aidan in the morning, where we were talking about the scorecards, where we were talking about the IFC validators, there's an IDS validator as well that Building Smart has actually put out there. And then this IDS validator was actually used in one of the Building Smart International Summits, where essentially they had a work session. They had this bingo chart where essentially 10 software vendors came together, looked at that bingo chart of exactly how IDSs have to be tested on what aspects and criteria. And everybody essentially went around using their software testing those IDSs that were provided to them as part of the work session. We're using those software as well. They're all published on the Building Smart International website as well in terms of what software to potentially use. And sometimes different software have different results. That's where IDS validation software also have to be certified. But we are basically testing using some of the software that we have essentially identified so that when we're developing those IDSs, we can simultaneously run through those tests and see if those IDSs are being developed correctly or not. So, so again, on the far left over there, right over there, we basically talk about the data dictionary as the starting point. Then we basically get into identifying the exchange information requirements for design to construction and digital as-bills. And we then take those pieces of information and start going through this iterative cycle of developing the IDM and IDS in a cyclic manner. We automate and we automate this process so that it's a little bit more scalable in terms of every time a data dictionary element changes, we update and create an IDS in a little bit more automated manner so that we are not spending 4 weeks actually updating the IDS and the IDM based on changes that have been made to the data dictionary. So there is some automation that we have done, but essentially, you know, just generating those XMLs in a little bit more smarter way is kind of the goal here so that we are more scalable in terms of the updates we are making. And then finally, what comes out is essentially, I say user acceptance testing and stakeholder validation. This is where our TAC committee essentially becomes involved. We are in a process right now where we are actually developing those IDM and IDSs, and I'll show you some screenshots there. So the TAC hasn't really started the user acceptance testing right now with these IDSs and IDM, but that's where we are going next over the next 6 months in terms of essentially having our committee review what these deliverables are going to be like. So, okay. So one of the things with that spreadsheet format and looking at the spatial containment and the elements that are involved is essentially the part where we also have to recognize that this data, this metadata about that we have in the data dictionary is best visualized in terms of the connectivity that they have through graph models or through other visualization models that are possible. So what we are also building is essentially the part where we understand that there is an object, there's a model element, it has a property set, that there can be multiple property sets. Each property set can have multiple properties associated with it. And those things have to be visualized so that you know which properties and which property sets you're bolting on to probably multiple elements across the board. Case in point, alignment information. Alignment is a property set that we want to ensure that we can use across all of those elements that have to be referenced using the alignment, whether it is curb and gutter, whether it is guardrail, whether it is median or whatever else, whatever properties we have for that alignment ID, the start station, end station, offset, and so on and so forth, we create a group of those properties. We basically say these property sets and properties are bolted on to these 6 elements in the information hierarchy. And that's using the alignment architecture that Building Smart has essentially put out. So visualizing that piece using graph models is something that we are also doing that basically ensures that we are being more correct in our development of these things and are more correct in our testing of these things as well. Okay, so a few more slides. I know I've got my 5-minute warning. Now I've got 2 minutes left. So these are only meant to actually give you a snapshot of these deliverables, where they are in terms of development. We are at about 50% complete in terms of creating the IDM, that Word document, and about 25 to 30% complete in terms of actually generating an IDS. We've actually generated a draft IDS and run it through a validator as well. But again, that's our first run, and there we are in the process of doing that. So we have taken everything from that spreadsheet and we have developed an IDS. You saw this in the previous session as well, an XML document. We expect that spreadsheet to get updates continuously. It's a living document as well, and therefore the IDS needs to be automatically created from that spreadsheet, and that's one of the things that we're looking at. We don't have to live in the spreadsheet world, but like Julie said, we love to, it's easier understood by many stakeholders in the organization. So today we look at everything from at the spreadsheet, and we basically say we'll develop an IDS using the spreadsheet. Okay, the next thing is the IDM. Using that IDS that we have actually created, we create a reference guide, which essentially is an IDM that details in a simple readable format, something that's human readable, something that's consumable by our engineers. What exactly is in that IDS? What does it mean when we say that some information about project site, road segments, alignment needs to be actually included? So just the machine readable part is on the right, and then the human readable part is on the left. And both of these things are being developed simultaneously. We also run the IDS, the XML document, using software IDS validators. And this is where the alignment between the Word and the XML document needs to be there. We cannot throw the Word document in those IDS validators, but we can throw the IDS into those validators as well. So that's something that we actually do, and we track our errors and figure out what exactly is wrong with those IDS as we move forward. And with that said, I'm gonna stop here. I think I finished just on time. And we'll take questions later. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're going to bring Mr. Jim back up to tell us all about IFC validation certification.
Yeah, I'm bad. I don't have the. Yep. That's a great start. So it's me again. This is on software validation and file certification, pooled fund solicitation that was posted. I'm going to start out. I only have 2 slides. Everyone says to start out with a joke, and it was brought to my attention in my last presentation. I said 6 or 7 about 4 or 5 times during that whole presentation without even realizing it. So for anyone with kids definitely knows what that means. Well, it means nothing, but so this slide I'm going to go over real quick. So we have our ADCMS project. Thomas Hamsky and I think Joe Brenner will be, or Grant will be presenting on that tomorrow. So I don't want to go on that too much, but part of this is we developed an IFC file and we went through and evaluated many softwares to see which one was the best to use. Here, I'm going to sound like John back there if I get a little. So no, I'm going to get serious again. So we went through and we evaluated all these. So then that led to last year when we were talking at all these discussions, we said, well, how do we specify an IFC deliverable? So an owner goes to a consultant and says, hey, deliver us an IFC 4.3. We just can't say that. So you need, that's what kind of led to this software certification and validation for the files, pooled fund proposal solicitation. Ian Howe helped out tremendously with this. Currently, we are up to 12 partners, and that includes the FHWA. Some of the objectives, I got notes here. I'll use these. Enable DOTs, this is to help enable us to ensure that we have a good quality data set, ensuring we can validate those data sets. Now, you heard earlier today that BSI has developed, validation, software certification, but we need more than that. They're still in beta, and we need our software validation and file certification. It isn't fully dependent just on what BSI has. So BSI had that scorecard, and I don't know if you guys looked at that scorecard, but I haven't seen a button on that scorecard that says, design to construction, BIM for bridge, pooled fund data exchange. And so we need to make sure that we can exchange the data we need to make sure we have a good file coming in. There's other parts of that. So the first phase of this would be a discovery phase. It would look at what BSI has developed. What do we need in addition to that? And how do we ensure and know that we can specify, a valid IFC file and have a certified software? Another thing we discussed. So I brought up support for these implementation efforts. We go through all this work and, we went through our pooled funds. And, for the 2 states, the pooled fund provided a little bit of support to ensure that, as they use the results from those pooled funds to update the IDMs, IDSs, and all of that. We learned a tremendous amount for that, but that can't be a primary focus. So part of this would be supporting implementation efforts and developing these standards. Another item is the software. So currently the validation service, I believe, is in Ireland. Is that correct? Or Amsterdam? A lot of DOTs cannot send their data overseas. So this would have to be set up and established in the United States to use that. And then of course, the education and training component, and then really the use case base. So, you know, we've talked about a lot of this. You know, we need that design construction use case basis, but other use case basis, you know, seeing BIM for infrastructure getting to the point where they have, you know, IDM and IDS, and they're getting close, you know, to having that design to construction exchanges. You know, they're going to need this type of support too. And then I'm going to kind of throw it open. I'd really like to have a discussion on this. If there's questions on it, you know, I've reached out to a lot of states. That's how we got the 12 up there. There is 4 states that I owe more information to, including Arizona, Minnesota. I learned that from Ed Lutkin, Montana, and North Carolina. But then there's some states that haven't responded yet. You know, I know Alabama's out there somewhere. You can get Rami to email me. You know, even if you give me an answer I don't like, it is nice to get a response back. It just helps speed up the process. From a timeline standpoint, we started this solicitation about, I think, 9-10 months ago. It was after BIM week last year. We're planning on closing it out soon. I'll reach out to those 4 or 5 states and the other ones one more time, try to get a meeting set up if they still need more information after this awesome presentation. You know, and try to get this, and then we're going to close that solicitation out. That being said, there was 2 targets. You know, the minimum to get this pooled fund started was 1 million. Ideally, we would have liked to have 2 million, and we're still short of that goal, but at least we have enough to get it started. So from that, is there any questions? Because we will have 6 or 7 states piloting this, because this will be part of the fabrication exchange too. So let's see if I can get that in 2 or 3 more times. No, because someone's going to watch this video 10 years from now and wonder what we're talking about with music and 6-7. And if anyone, oh, thank you, Rick. I knew I had a friend out there.
I don't have any questions, so I'm going to weigh in support of what you're talking about. This isn't just a bridge thing. I mean, Jim's the face of bridges, right? This affects anybody using IFC in terms of deliverables and whatnot, right? We talked about this before. It's start of the validation service is the lowest level of things. It's the spelling checker. If we can't get even your basic model right, everything downstream is going to struggle. So this is vitally important for that. You know, Hayden was kind of saying, you know, we're getting close to version 1. Well, that's because the list is this long. And so they had to make a subset of the list to say, this is version 1. There's more stuff. We have talked about the Building Smart Data Dictionary integration into our IFC models and stuff. Those connections aren't being validated at this point. They were experimented with early on in the validation service. You can go back through their GitHub issue trackers and things with it. I think at the time, it just didn't make sense to pursue it any further because there was higher priority things that got turned off. That's something that's going to be very important to us. All of our model classifications depend on content in that data dictionary. That classification isn't going to work unless it's done right. You won't be able to query it and interrogate it. And this whole thing with the validation service plus IDSs, those are just kind of like the first level steps in a quality digital management process, right? There's other validations out there. And ultimately we want, you know, validated deliverables to enhance, you know, our project delivery and management quality. So these are important steps to get us there. Yeah, I think that's enough rah, rah, rah.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Stuff.
Put your hand up at the back.
Yeah. What?
Connor, have a question?
All right. Yeah, just wanted to say that you know, you're talking about how, you know, we've seen other things about validation out there. But, you know, Building Smart, they built an SDK for validation for a purpose. And that was so everybody else could actually take that SDK and build their own tools for their own specific needs. And that's the kind of thing that Building Smart does, is they build tools for other people to use, not exclusively things that are supposed to solve your problems. So I think this is a great way to go if what you're looking for is something that's going to validate your needs and store data in ways that you need it to, because Building Smart's not going to make that for everybody.
I wanted to make the same point, actually, because we had this discussion earlier that actually we have the beta version available, but the pooled fund will allow you, because we will provide you the platforms to build the tools that support your needs. And I think that's really critical in this example. So I think this pooled fund can really help accelerate that. And like Rick said, the downstream effect of this is going to be really big for this group of people here. And I think this is really, for me, this is a really fantastic opportunity. And I love the education and training, because I think part of this should be really about upskilling and getting your hands on with these tools as well. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. We'll get right into our Q&A. Wait, you have one more?
Yeah, I just wanted to say your desired outcomes do show IDS validation, and maybe there is a thought that the spool fund itself could be titled IFC and IDS validation, because they're obviously two different things. And I think the outcomes do say that there is IDS validation, but it'd be good to. So your outcomes do say that there is an IDS validation that is a goal for this particular pool fund. But I think with the name itself, if it says IFC and IDS validation and software certification, it would probably line up a little bit more with the goals.
Thank you, Jim, again.
Oh, how many more states are going to participate? Sorry, you don't have to answer now. Perfect. I can go get some more coupons. I really want to thank, the people who put this, Kyle for helping plan all this stuff, since I won't be up here again for much longer, and they'll probably never give me a mic again. The sponsors, BSI and JSTAN, for hosting this, and all the people that have put effort to make this happen. I think this is a really great event and really helping. It's nice to actually get the software vendors in with us when we're talking about this stuff and what we need and what we're going to try to do. So thank you, everyone.